work around cooperation rather than collaboration. So if you have the notion that collaboration means, I'll say this is the way I'm defining it for today, for this purpose, that when a group of people agree to a single goal that they're all going to march toward in their work, and they've achieved a consensus around that, that's a collaborative mindset. A cooperative mindset is that people could be working together for different goals that are largely overlapping or heading in roughly the same direction. But you don't have to stamp out dissent. You can disagree on parts of things. And you can say, I don't agree with it, but Stowe's going to run that piece of it, and I'll do my part. As long as we make it work, that's more important. But fast and loose means you have to weaken social bonds. For example, the nature of the relationship between an employee and their first-line manager in most companies is an extremely strong tie. You have so many things involved. That's the guy who's rating you. He's the one that's going to try to promote you. He's the one that's going to find mentorship for you. He's the one that's going to approve your travel to go somewhere and learn something. And as a result, it's a very tight bond. So you need to build, deep culture is based on a less friction, less static ties, and much looser. So you might wind up with more connections with people that you're working with in the business, but they're weaker. Now that sounds negative, but strong ties are what slows things down in business, or in any social group. So we have to get away from slow and tight. Have to be more agile in decision making instead of deliberative. That means, a group of people can make a decision. They don't have to ask permission 7 levels up in the hierarchy and get an approval of it. And 6 months have passed, and meanwhile they didn't get anywhere. Open in public instead of closed in private, so that there's higher visibility, more transparency, an inclination towards publicity instead of privacy.
And so on, yeah. But of course, if you somebody who maybe travels a lot, you don't look into it, so then notifications are good. I'm saying notifications aren't bad. I wouldn't count them for.
For me, it was more the importance of your view on the future of work.
Well, the most fundamental thing about what's happening today and likely to continue into the near future is that the nature of work is changing, and it's changing very fast. And they're not superficial changes. These are foundational, very basic, central things are changing. One of the things I point at as a clear demarcation of that we're in a new era relative to work is the research done by the New York Federal Reserve Bank, and they analyzed work categories and determined that in 2005 we passed the point where 50% of jobs trending upward were non-routine creative work. And so if you think about those 2 categories, it means there's 4 quadrants. Non-routine, non-creative work is also growing, but that's like service jobs. That's like being a waiter, right? But routine, non-creative work is disappearing, and routine creative work is actually being challenged by AI and robots. At any rate, if you extrapolate the curve at the rate it was growing at 2005, now we're probably getting to approximately 70%. So, and that means that people in the other categories are in trouble. Not the waiters, at least not yet. But the AI, will probably solve that too. Like the other day, I went into a restaurant in the airport, and they don't come take your order anymore. There's a tablet, you choose your drinks and your dinner, and a human being brings it to you, but you didn't have to talk to them at the beginning. So even that is being streamlined pretty aggressively. Anyway, the point is That's a real fundamental change, because before that, the number of people who were creatives, doing non-routine work, was less than half of the population. And now it's less than half of the occupations. And so now it's shifted, and that's leading to all kinds of huge economic disruption, but it also means the nature of what's going on inside of businesses is changing, what people do and how they do it. As one obvious fallout from that is we're seeing a transition away from the notion of business as being a bunch of business processes where people are applied to those processes as having a role and doing some step function. But in a world in which your work is increasingly creative and non-routine, the notion that business processes will run what's going on inside of a business or will run the critically important stuff inside of a business is decreasing. Anything that can be routinized to that level where a business process could do it, it's probably going to be done by software.
So how does knowledge fit in there?
Well,
Knowledge worker or knowledge generally?
well, you still have knowledge workers.
Yeah.
Increasingly, the proportion of people in a company are going to be, a greater number of them are going to be knowledge workers. So that's true of, let's say, General Electric, where years and years ago they had people on the manufacturing floor, like running tool cutting machines. That's all done by robots now. People still have to program those things, or they have to program the algorithmic or AI intelligence that programs those things. But things change very dramatically when you start to imagine a day not too far in the future where the AIs will program themselves. And so the guy that's programming stuff now at GE, he may be, or she may be, out of a job in a few years. So it's a very precarious, fast-changing world, and even categories like radiologist, reading an X-ray to determine if someone has cancer. Well, AI is better at that than radiologists, right? So people have found that human beings are terrible at hiring people. They're terrible at it. We have too many cognitive biases to do a good job of it, even if you're trained, even if you're aware of the biases. And so a lot of companies in very well-defined places now, well-defined job niches, are using AI, for example, to make hiring decisions. So, for example, Cornerstone, which used to be called Evolve, has technology that the major corporations in the US who are hiring call center people, they just use Cornerstone's technology to pick them. They don't pick them themselves. Because Cornerstone has access to big data. They've done this with hundreds of really big companies, and they've run these very detailed personality tests. And from that, they can crunch to determine who's going to make a good call center person. And it turns out, among other things, they're curious but not empathetic, which seems odd. But as a result, they don't get bogged down in feeling bad that somebody has a problem. They're just interested in figuring the problem out. So somebody like a large insurance company or Xerox, who's doing support of people with their copiers, they just hire the greens that come out of their algorithm, and if they have to, they'll take the yellows, but they never take the reds. It sounds like a dystopian science fiction novel, doesn't it?
I love Blade Runner, but I'm not sure I like Minority Report.
This is more like, I think this is more like
Brazil.
No. It's what is it? Divergence. Where they're all the different sub genres. I mean, the little sects that they have.
I mean, for me personally, what bothers me is I like tags in knowledge management, but I don't like etiquettes and boxes for people, because I think that people might surprise you and people might always, step out of the box that you try to put them in. So what you're telling me is that, we're trying in a way to put people in boxes. Like you say, you want to hire the greens because they fit into that box and they don't,
It's because they want a better predictor of success. you know, one of the classic examples of this is Google, right? Who was famous for those strange interview questions.
Yeah.
Like how many ping pong balls can fit into a school bus and that sort of thing. Well, they found out that that kind of questioning, and also whether or not you went to a top-notch college or had a 4.0 GPA, did not correlate with success at Google. They found that there were other characteristics. And so now, here's the thing. They threw the old away because they did the analysis. And instead now they use a different approach. They're looking for certain personality characteristics. Are people incredibly curious? Are they committed to lifetime learning? Are they, do they show the signs of what they call emergent leadership? That is, are they willing to step forward and lead something when it's called for and necessary and they believe they have the skills to do it? And are they willing to then step back out of a leadership role and let other people lead at other times? And they have a couple of other criteria, but the point is, oh, and if you're a programmer, they test how good your programming is, but that's a special case, right?
Okay.
But the point is that these things are actually correlated with future success at Google. And so it makes sense, it's rational. You can measure these things.
It's very rational. What bothers me is not the success, it's the control you want to have on this prediction. Because success or innovation, if you watch it from an agile perspective, or it can come from anywhere. You just go through these iterations and sometimes you just might be surprised. It's like serendipity. And I'm going a little bit out of your, but it's very difficult to understand why you want to predict so much everything.
Because it's so expensive to hire people and to let them go later. The cost of turnover is very high. You have to train them, hire them, you pay them money, and then if they don't work out, they leave, or you ask them to leave. It's just a waste of money and time and other people's efforts.
I understand it for certain categories. I don't understand it for all of the categories.
Well, it's used for all the categories at Google, which is sort of a very broad spectrum, right, of people. I mean, they're using the same things for their HR staff or people in accounting, right?
Okay.
As well as the engineering people. And I mean, it does imply a different era, a different set of criteria as to what sort of people work there because the nature of how Google is now operating, right? So it is a cultural mix, and you throw people into it, you want to find people that are going to fit. But fit doesn't necessarily mean we all went to Stanford or Dartmouth and we all played lacrosse, which is the kind of cultural fit you find at like venture capital firms.
Yeah, I understand.
This is different. This is they are going to be successful in the jobs that they might have at the company.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly wise because it's better for everyone involved.
Okay. I'm curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, Laszlo Bock is the guy who's head of people operations now.
Okay.
And he's made some really huge changes there.
Where does he come from?
I don't know where he was before Google, but he's in that job now. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
The long and the short of it. Yeah. So the long and the short of this is that Keenan was moving out to Brooklyn, and he didn't have a guitar. So I gave him mine because I wanted to buy a better guitar.